What is going on? I am going to go over the latest tool that DTO is offering. There is many different ways you can use this tool, but because I have just started using it and I'm not ready to dive into the ICM sims yet, because I'm going to be honest, I'm not great at ICM, which means I definitely 100% should be using it. But I'm just going to show you the very basic ways that I use this tool for studying. I'm also going to give you a little dive into my database just from the last couple of months, so that we can compare stats, because this tool, in my opinion, makes it very easy to learn what are important strategies. Because until I'd ever looked at some preflop charts or a tool like this DTO Preflop tool, it's very hard to know exactly what hands you should be playing. Everybody knows that you raise aces on the button, but does everybody know what you 3-bet out of the big blind versus a cutoff open? Does everybody know exactly what you should be raising in the low jack? And I've looked at my stats from this year and I'm a little bit ashamed because they actually look pretty tight. They actually look very, very tight. We usually run around 25-17 overall, and it's looking at about 23-16 here with only an 8% 3-bet. So this year so far looks like we've been a little bit tight. We haven't played that many hands. It's like 8,000 hands, so it's not a massive sample in the way that I've filtered it. But it will definitely be something that we can look into, and will be something where I'm sure we will pick up some things. So I'm going to dive into the tool. I'm going to show you how it looks. This is the DTO Preflop tool. So this, as you can see, is a 30 big blind raise first in. So what we can do first is we can click here in the low jack. It will show us that we should be raising 24% of hands, not raising all of the pocket pairs. We're fourth plus, we're every suited ace, which I think most people, like, you should be finding these for 30 big blinds. Like, this is very, very easy. And then, like, the simple heuristics that you can kind of cheat with, it's just like, all right, well, for these 30 big blinds, we never fold an 8. Like, all the suited 8s are opens, all the offsuit 10s. Like, you can, yes, you mix jack 10, but if you just open all the 10s, it's fine. You know what I mean? We're not bots. We're not going to remember exactly. The idea is not to look at these charts and remember exact percentages at all times, because that's impossible. Like, we're just not good enough at that. You can actually change how it looks as well. You can change it to this shape. I actually kind of prefer the pie, but yeah, so you can click through these different hands, and the way I'm going to show you how I use it, we're going to go through a bunch of different spots, obviously. We'll go from the button and left, right? So if you want to look at what the button should open, so it should be around 46%. Now you look at this. Is there any hands automatically that you see that you don't open? For me personally, the hands that people might miss would be these queen 3 suiteds, jack 4 suiteds, 10-5 suiteds, 9-6 suiteds. Some of this stuff isn't that intuitive, but like, you got to go down as far as king 7 off. So right, this is at 46%, and then I can actually go into my database, which is here, and this is from the last couple of months since we've been playing, and I have filtered, as you'll see, is actual stack size between 25 and 35 big blinds. So that's why there's only 8,000 hands. And I'm going to say that's why some of the spots overall might be a little too tight. But as you can see here, I'm actually raising 50% on the button at this stack size. And of course, it goes up a little bit. It goes up to 35 big blinds. So maybe I get away with a few more opens. But when I look at this, I'm probably raising some hands too wide. Like, I would probably raise queen deuce, probably raise jack tray and jack deuce if I was at a soft table. And that is something that you do need to consider, though. When you are playing a scoop and you've got, see, Darwin and Dom and all the good players, you know, in the blinds, you don't want to extend these ranges. But if you're against tighter players, you know, flicking in some of these suited hands might be okay. Like, I wouldn't fold 9-5 suited, I wouldn't fold 7-4 suited. These hands, so maybe I'm opening a little too wide. And what will happen is, if we click fold here from low jack, fold here from high jack, fold here from the cutoff, we're on the button, right? So the button raises. So then we want to look at the small blind strategy, right? Sorry, excuse me. Let me go back. All right, so I kind of messed up there a little bit. All right, so we fold, and the button raises, and then we look at the small blind strategy. Okay, so if we're raising too wide, look at all the hands that they already get to go all in with, right? Are you shoving all of these hands for 30 big blinds? Are you shoving 9-10 suited 100% of the time? Are you shoving jack 9 suited 100% of the time? All these lower suited aces, from the small blind? Are you just shoving these? Pretty much every pair. Like, you can just cheat and shove every pair and 3-bet call jacks plus. You don't need to remember these little things. Obviously, in an ideal world, there's reasons you need to have these, because you need to be able to have sets on certain boards, or you are going to run into a little bit of trouble. But these hands, like, it's these ones, right? I don't think Young Pred Poker, who some people might know, actually posted a hand to me where he had 9-10 suited in the small blind, and he asked some people what would they do there, and they told him to shove, and he couldn't really believe it, because this is a hand that just does so well when we get called, that like shoving here, we're just going to be printing chips. So what happens if I start raising too many hands against good regs? Queen 9 suited's going in, King 9 suited might start going in. You know, weaker hands, they can shove and make chips against me. So you need to be careful of what exactly you're doing. But obviously the overall strategy here, the hands that we are going to be 3-bet calling looks like Ace 9 suited plus. Don't imagine that we 3-bet fold that. Jacks plus. Maybe I want to actually see. So if we raise, big blind folds, and it's back on the button, and we're just going to shove here because I want to see. Yeah. So obviously the hands. I didn't think they would raise. They would 3-bet fold Ace 9 suited, but I was just making sure. And this is what the tool can do. You can see exactly what you're meant to do. Some of this stuff will look alien, but once you 3-bet 9-8 suited, given the price that you're getting, you actually just don't get the fold. You're obviously using this hand so that you actually have coverage on some of the boards, but then our equity is going to be too high versus hands they will shove. But there's just lots of different ways, right? So we looked at the button, and my opening percentage actually looks like it's a little too high. So let's go back to the start, and we can look at the cutoff here. So cutoff's 35%. Some of these hands to beginners might be a little bit alien, but if you're not opening these King X suited hands, your stats are going to be too tight everywhere. This was one of the easiest fixes that I had to my game. Like in the cutoff, I might have been King 7 plus. You extend all the way down to King 3 suited. You bring in these Queen 5s, these Jack 6s. Looking at this range, like I would like to think that I open all of these hands, but when I look at my stats, now, admittedly, like this is a small sample, right? But as you see here, I'm only at like just under 33%. Now, what I would do if I wanted to dive into this deeper, I would click into these hands. I would filter out hands such as, I would filter out all the best hands, right? So I'd filter out all the suited ace-x hands. I would filter out maybe King 7 suited plus. I would filter out the pairs. And then I would keep in like the bottom hands, and then I would flick through my database, and I would see, oh, I actually am folding these hands. Now that could be a product of too many tables. It could be just not paying full attention, because when I look at this chart, this feels to me like a reasonable range. But if you are new to the game, you might be like, what do you mean you open Queen 5 suited in the cutoff for 30 big blinds? Jack 9 off, you got to open. 10-9 off, pure. This is a hand that I think a lot of regs will miss. Like regs, like people that play pretty well, but they're just too tight. The ace 5, you got to open. These hands, though, these are kind of garbage, right? So we don't need to open all these. Unless the table is extremely soft in the cutoff, these ones are going to be folds. And again, we just look at this, and we'll show it. We will show it in practice where the cutoff raises. Now, we're on the button. This is a spot where I think a lot of people are going to mess up, right? So we obviously have 3 options. We can call, we can raise, or we can all in. So we look at the button strategy. So what do we want to be calling? All these hands. We're calling King 8 suited, we're calling 10-8 suited, 8-7 suited. We call most of the pairs. We're going to be mixing some of them to shove. But what is it that we want to 3-bet? It's these hands, right? Queen 8 suited is 63% 3-bet. King 7 suited, we're 3-betting. Obviously 10s, jacks, queens, kings, these are going to mix between flat calling, maybe some shoving with 10s. Let's have a little look again. So yeah, 10s does some all-ins, 10s does some shoves. But one thing that I reckon a lot of regs will miss as well, and this was definitely eye-opening for me the first time I looked at this stuff. You're meant to call with jacks 70% of the time when the cutoff opens and you're on the button. 70% of the time. How often do you think you call with jacks in that situation? Queens, you're meant to call with a quarter of the time. Obviously, as you get more advanced, you can start using a randomizer and try and remember these. But like, if you could just, you know, cheat a little bit and be like, I will flat queens half the time and jacks half the time, and that will kind of even out. Obviously, queens do much better as a 3-bet because you're getting value much more. But kings, we're almost flatting half the time, and aces 75% of the time. Now, why would we want to flat these hands so much? I would say, watch what happens, right? So we call, and now look at the small blind strategy. They're going to be going all in 8% of the time. And look at the hands they need to pull the trigger with. King 9 suited, Jack 10 suited, all these pairs, Queen Jack, King Jack. Look at all the ace X they shove. And what's going to happen with us? We're just going to be sitting there with aces. We're going to be sitting there with queens. We're going to be sitting there with kings a lot. We're going to be sitting there with these really strong hands. And let's say they fold. What's the big blind shoving? This is going to be a very reasonable range. I would never find 8-7 suited. I would not in a million years. So that's something I'm learning. 8-7 suited is shoving 37% of the time. I probably won't do this in game anyway. It just feels too alien to me. But as you can see, it'll make chips. That is under the assumption that what you got to take into consideration though. That all in is under the assumption that when the cutoff makes this 2.6, that the button will have all of these calls. Okay? Like you need to make sure that your opponents have these calls, or something like 8-7 suited's all of a sudden going to be bad, right? But if it's a spot where you think plays similar to how it does, you get the fold here, and then we see the strategy. What hands? So what, like, if we don't look at it, just try and think about it. Now, I gave a little bit of a spoiler there. I gave a little bit of a flash, but what hands do you think the big blind will squeeze here? Because I think people will miss this a lot of the time, right? Raise. Ace-2 suited we can use as a raise. Honestly, I make a mistake here because the hands that I use a lot of the time are actually the offsuit ace-X. That's again something I'm learning. So look at this: Queen 9 suited, Queen 8 suited, Jack 9 suited. When do you see people do that? You don't. People just click call with these hands. This is a pure re-raise with Jack 9 suited. Because obviously, when we get called, it still flops pretty well. And it blocks some of the hands they're going to get in with, like jacks and 9s. But this is a hand that I like. There's no way I'm pure 3-betting these hands. I study this stuff like a reasonable amount, and I'm not pure re-raising. 5s is just again for board coverage, just so you can have some sets and 3-bet pots. I'm pretty sure. But yeah, it's extremely interesting. And if we do see the big blind all in, what can the cutoff call? Ace-10, 7s, King Queen suited. It seems reasonable. Again, I would be careful calling maybe these hands if you don't believe that the big blind is pulling the trigger wide enough. But it's just this is how you should use the tool. You should look at spots that are very like button raises, cutoff raises, button calls, big blind. That is such a common spot. It's such a common spot. But you probably don't really know how to play the spot. Whereas if you look at this, it's all very easy to take in the information, and you'll just pick up some little cheats. You'll be like, oh, ace-5 suited, ace-4 suited, ace-7 suited. Look at all this. Look at all this shoving with these suited hands. Look at these pairs that are just ripping. And it's just like things that you can cheat and remember and hopefully improve the way you play. But let's have a little look. Let's start again. Let's go back to the low jack. So low jack folds. So hijack on Poker Tracker 4, it puts the hijack and the low jack in together. It's just classed as MP. So this should be a 29% raise. And when we go over to my stats, you'll see that we're at a measly 22.5%. Now, I probably should have a higher raise percentage than this. It is, these all stats look a little bit tighter than my normal overall database, but it's not a huge amount of hands. And this is obviously 2 positions piled in together. So let's say this should be at around 25%. So what hands would be raising in the hijack that maybe we sometimes wouldn't think are too intuitive? Right, so 6-5 suited, pure. King 5 suited, Queen 6 suited, Jack 7, 10 7. We're still raising Jack 10 off. King 9 off is going to mix heavily. and we're down as far as a7. So I look at this range, and I think pretty reasonable. But again, if you've never seen charts like this, you might not know. Now, I should make it very, very clear that this is a tool to be used off the tables. You cannot have this open when you're playing because that is just against the rules. But when you're off the tables, you can just like try and learn these little cheat codes, like every suited ace, and then it goes king 5, queen 6, jack 7. Usually they will be in this pattern where it goes from bottom to top, right? Where you just cut off, you cut off one queen, you cut off one jack, and then like it'd be all the sevens. It's usually something similar to that. So ooh, my headphones just realized I'm not even listening to music and I've got the headphones on. But so we can, a spot that I think is interesting. So the hijack raises, and I think this is a spot where players will miss a lot. So small blind, it comes around to the big blind. Do you think you go all in a lot here when you're in the big blind for 30 big blinds? And do you think you have a lot of 3-bet folds? Because it's very easy to just click call when you're in the big blind. And I actually think the big blind 3-betting is one of the big issues that even like good regs have. Like, I don't know how other people feel, but when I get when someone 3-bets me from the big blind, if I don't recognize them or if I don't consider them to be like one of the elite regs or whatever, I'm just like, all right, they just have it. But if you actually look at the strategy, now this is only 30 big blinds deep. If you look at the strategy here, these are the hands we're going to be 3-betting. Look, we have some ace 8 offs, we have some king 9 offs, we have queen 5 offs, we have queen 4 offs. So how it usually constructs these 3-betting ranges is what they will do is they will take the hands that are towards the bottom of the calling range that are probably about break even, and they will slide them up into the 3-betting range. So for example, for 30 big blinds, you don't really want to 3-bet ace 8 suited, because if you 3-bet ace 8 suited, you're going to be 3-bet folding a lot of equity. But if you 3-bet queen 5 off 25% of the time, who cares? You're probably going to make not many chips. But this is, again, how I would use this tool. Just pick up spots that are very common, like extremely common. You're always going to be raising it in the hijack, big blind, and then you look at this, and then you have a little look. What does the big blind want to go all in with? Big blind's gone all in with 5% of hands. It's nothing too gangster. Sometimes you'll see these hands a lot, the suited broadways. They'll just rip them in. A lot of people, jack 10 suited, automatically just want to click call. But as you can see, this is a hand that we're going to shove more than we're going to flat call. So today, during my session, for those who are watching on Twitch, this is something we need to do more of. 30 big blinds versus the hijack. Jam it in. What are they going to do? All right, and we'll look at one more spot that obviously is one of the most common. We'll go back to the start. We will just go fold, 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 and then button raises, fold, and the big blind. So what's our strategy versus a button open? We are bluffing again with these hands. Jack 5 off, 10 6 off, 10 7 off, Jack 7 off, King 7 off. A lot of the time, the reason they're using the 7x's here is that if you look at the buttons range, I'm probably maybe not doing that the most efficient way, but if you look at the buttons range here, usually the 7s are taken out. So that's usually where our 3-betting range will start. It's the same way as if it's against the cutoff. If you watch, it'll probably be the 8s where we actually use some more of the 3-bet. So we go back here, goes fold, fold, raise, fold, fold, and look at their 3-betting range. They start to use some more of the 8s, right? It's just kind of how it works in general. But and anyway, let's just look at this like one more time, and then we will call it a day. But we are going to be doing some more of this with ICM Sim. So button raises, there's a fold, and the big blind. So as we've seen, these are the hands that we are 3-bet folding. These are the hands that we are going to obviously be 3-bet calling. But look at all the hands we're going all in with. King 7 suited, King 6 suited, 9-8 suited, 10-8 suited, Ace 4 suited, Ace 5 suited. We're just ripping these in. And I just think that's something that a lot of players are going to miss a lot of the time. And that's pretty much how I will use these tools. I will pick a spot that maybe I'm not feeling too confident about, a spot that I may be missing 3-bets. You know, you can look up your stats, you can find out. Like, I'm looking at my big blind 3-bet's like 9.2% here, which is probably a little bit too tight, but my button 3-bet in this sample, if we go back to my HUD, it's just like less than 7%. So this is obviously something that again, it's a small sample, but 7% 3-bet, even over 8,000 hands. It's 1,000 hands on the button. It's not great. So that's something that I would want to be looking at, and I would use both tools, and I would flick back and forward. Oh. I would flick back and forward, and I would look to improve. But if you haven't already checked it out, this video is going to be getting played on my stream during my breaks on easyaces.tv. It is going to be on the DTO YouTube, and it is going to be on my own YouTube. You can get more details in my chat by pressing !DTO Pre. This is just an extension to the tool that I've already used. It's just, obviously, DTO has always done the pre-flop spots, and then I've come out with this tool, which I think for a lot of players, it can really help your game, because if you're playing too many hands against really good players, you're gonna have big issues. And if you're just being too tight against really good players, you're just gonna get run over. So I hope you enjoyed that. It's just a little look into how I study, and it's a little look into the latest DTO tool. I'll be back next week, and we will be doing another video. Thank you very much.